You understand exactly what you're doing and why. And when you understand the meaning behind it, your prefrontal cortex turns on. And when it does, the powerhouse turns on, and you can get in an ice bath and know nothing about it.
Hello, and welcome to the Pacific Channel. I'm your host, Steve Doherty. In this video, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to discuss 10 rules for life from the Dr. Joe Dispenza audio clips. The idea is to not just discuss these rules, but also to discuss the how. Most of the time, we get a lot of great information from Dr. Joe as to the why and the what, but not a whole lot on the how. Although Dr. Joe prefers to not talk about the law of attraction very much, he does believe in it. One of the reasons why he chooses to steer away from discussing it is that many people simply don't believe in it. So he prefers to explain things as scientifically as possible and then leave it up to the individual person to fill in the blanks when it comes to the deeper questions about who we really are and how the universe really works. But here at the Pacific Channel, we are going to help fill in the blanks so that everything will make sense to you. But if anything doesn't feel right to you, that's perfectly fine. We all have the choice to believe whatever we want to believe. Take what makes sense to you and use it in your life. Personally, I was raised in a very strict cult religion. For me to break out of the matrix of that cult, I had to apply a lot of what Dr. Joe talks about. But I didn't have this information back in my mid-20s and early 30s. When I found out that my religion was a cult, I was so heartbroken and so lost at first. I felt betrayed, lost, and angry for falling for all the lies. So in my mind, I decided to wipe the slate clean of all my old beliefs and be open to new ones. That led me to the path that I am on now, discovering this kind of incredible information that otherwise I may not have been open to. The point is, the bigger that your problems are, the bigger the contrast. The bigger that your failures are, the bigger of a bounce you can take in the opposite direction. This is why when you really get into this work deeply, you end up blessing all of the bad stuff, because without it, you wouldn't have been able to go so far into the good stuff. So what we are going to do is this. I'm going to introduce each of the 10 rules for life to you briefly, then let Dr. Joe discuss it. Then I'll do my best to explain what Dr. Joe is saying, plus a little bit about what I know on the subject matter. This way, I hope to help fill in the gaps of understanding that you may have. I am truly thankful to Dr. Joe for being so resolute and determined to bridge the gap between the spiritual and the scientific worlds. No longer can scientists ignore this work. No longer can they dismiss us as quacks. Instead of fighting this work, some scientists are embracing it, and they are actually attending his workshops. And they are having amazing results, such as curing their cancer in a week. After this series of 10 rules for life, hopefully you'll have action steps that you can take right away to help yourself. And listen to Dr. Joe discuss it now. Let's begin with rule number 1. Retire your old personality.
If you keep firing and wiring the same thoughts in your mind that are related to complaining and blaming and making excuses and feeling sorry for yourself and judging other people, nerve cells that fire together, wire together, you'll develop a very, very complex neurological network that you installed, and keep doing it. It becomes so automatic, it becomes unconscious. Those thoughts, for the most part, are slipping by people's awareness unnoticed, unchecked. And every thought has a chemical associated with it. So the moment the person begins to review the problems in their life, and those problems are connected to certain people and certain objects and certain conditions at certain times and places, the moment they start thinking of their problems, they're thinking in the past, because the brain literally is a record of the past, and every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So the moment they recall the problem, they feel the emotion of sadness or guilt or shame or unworthiness. Now the body's in the past. So then if you begin to weigh the number of times people unconsciously do that in their waking day, They may have the best visualization, meditation, rehearsal in the morning and start out with really good intentions. But that's 45 minutes or a half an hour weighed against the other 16 or 15 hours of their day where they're back to their old self. And so the thinking positively have no effect on the body because it's a small portion of what the person is doing on a regular basis. So the process of change, there's an equal component of unlearning. There's an equal component of becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, becoming aware of your automatic habits and behaviors, even how you speak, and sensing and noticing the emotions that you feel that have become so familiar to you on a regular basis that it feels like you. And the moment you stop doing that, you got to get ready because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. It's not going to feel like you anymore. And many people will go back to suffering and complaining because at least they know how they feel. They were back in the known. So this is such an important concept because this explains why people, when they do the work and they don't notice the results, they get up from their meditations believing in their future less, instead of doing their meditations and getting up and believing in their future more, right? And so the reality is, yes, it takes equal amount of firing and wiring and equal amount of emotional conditioning to condition the body to the future. But you have to retire the personality of the past, and you got to stay so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't go unconscious in your waking day. And that's being in that river of change, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of awareness to do it.
Dr. Joe has said many times that if you keep on firing and wiring the same old negative thoughts, you will develop and install a complex neurological network into your brain. And if you don't do anything about that, if you don't do anything with it, it will become your known, your personality, your normal state of being. One author described it as ants in our brains, automatic negative thoughts. These happen so automatically that we don't even realize it. So, for example, if you see your ex and you haven't worked on your thoughts and feelings about him or her, you will get triggered to think automatic thoughts, which create automatic feelings, which create automatic behaviors, and ultimately, it creates who we are. This is why many times we feel like we don't even have any control over how we feel. It's because we aren't doing anything beforehand to change the vibration around that subject. In this case, the subject of our ex is what can trigger a cascade of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that lower our vibration, which sends us down a negative path. So what can we do? Become conscious of our unconscious thoughts, as Dr. Joe said. Monitor your thoughts and feelings. Step outside of the matrix that has you trapped in your personality and purposely set the intention to be more aware throughout your day. What are some other things that you can do? Number 1, challenge your own thoughts. Ask if it is true. Number 2, choose a better feeling thought. Every subject that there is to you, every person, every past event, every object, and with every past experience, you have a vibrational set point. You have a normal vibrational set point about the subject of money. You have a normal vibrational set point about the subject of men or women. You have a vibrational set point about the subject of your health. And here is the most important part. You have the choice of either thinking a slightly better feeling thought of where you are right now on that subject, on any subject, or a slightly worse feeling thought. The point is to choose the good ones. Choose to feel a little bit better. Number 3, you could do EFT, which will remove the emotional intensity of the subject matter. You can EFT yourself for anything. Number 4, you can meditate more during the day to raise your vibration. We can take a breather or a moment and just relax. And now let's look at rule number 2, which is be present.
Look, people can create all kinds of wealth, Ed. They can create all kinds of abundance. They can have the cars, the homes, and everything. But if they can't be present to enjoy them, I've sat with billionaires and they've looked me in the eye and said, we're all miserable.
Same here.
We're all miserable. And so then at what point do you have to wait to change? Does it have to be that lowest point? Or can you learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration instead of pain and suffering? And that becomes the art, right? So then to change then is to be greater than the habituations, the drives, and the emotions that have been conditioned in the body. To change is to be greater than the conditions in our environment, that every person, every object, everything in our life has a neurological network associated with them. They're knowns because we've experienced them and we have an emotion associated with them. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, you're left with the memories of the past, and you see your ex, and you're going to see your ex through the memory of your past neurologically, and it's going to elicit an emotional response. And you're thinking and feeling equal to your environment. Your life's not going to change. So then the next question is, how could I overcome that condition that with my ex? Can I actually forgive? Could I actually open my heart? Can I actually... The reason we do this is because the stronger the emotion we feel towards someone or something in our life, the more we pay attention to them. Yeah. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. And so then we're giving our power away to that person or circumstance. That's vital life force you could use to change. The person who's sitting in the meditation and they want to quit, they're thinking they're doing their meditation wrong. I want to tell you, you're doing it right. That's the defining moment, right? And you lower the volume to that emotion, I guarantee you'll take your attention off that person. And sooner or later, when the body finally settles down and you get beyond it, you're going to take your power back. And that's building your own electromagnetic field. Now you have energy.
So, according to Dr. Joe, all billionaires are miserable because they aren't living in the present moment. I'm sure there are some billionaires that aren't miserable, but the point is well taken. Money doesn't necessarily bring you happiness. Your attitude does. It's a choice. Repeat. It's a choice. Repeat. It's a choice, especially when you let go of the regret from the past and the worry about the future. Dr. Joe brings up the subject of a person's ex. Can you forgive your ex, even if what they did was really bad? One of the things that popped in my mind was something that Abraham, a law of attraction teacher, said, which was, others may not deserve your good thoughts about them, but you do. I've said this before, but it's such a great point. The point is that you are really only hurting yourself when you don't forgive others. It can help to forgive others if you see them as source energy beings who are simply out of alignment with who they are when they did choose bad things to do to you. And if you really want to get past it, acknowledge that you attract everything into your life, even the bad. As Dr. Joe Vitale once said on the Larry King Live Show, when you see it that way, when you take full responsibility for everything in your life, it's both liberating but irritating too, right? It's not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding that the bad things that happen to you will always lead to better things if you allow it. You have to start truly seeing yourself as a powerful creator. So in essence, there is nothing to forgive anyways, because we all attract everything. That's an advanced law of attraction concept, and if you don't want to see it that way, if you choose to be hurt or a victim still, that's fine. Just understand that you're really only hurting yourself by hanging on to anger or resentment. I'm still working on this one too, so don't expect yourself to just easily drop things. Give yourself time. The other point is that, as Dr. Joe said, when you hold a grudge against anyone for anything, you give your power away. You give away vital energy that can be used for other things, such as healing yourself or creating an abundant life. So it's never valuable to hold on to anger or resentment. And as a side point, guilt is one of the lowest vibrational frequency feelings. So give up the guilt too. Guilt is about being upset or angry with yourself. Forgive yourself for anything you've ever done. It doesn't serve any purpose to hold on to guilt or shame. Next is rule number 3. Practice mental rehearsal.
We don't see things how they are, we see things how we are. And so I don't like to use the word visualization because I think it's been overused. I like to use the word mental rehearsal. I don't care if you're a virtuoso musician. I don't care if you are a performer or an actor. I don't care if you're a dancer or an athlete. Everybody does this who's engaged in getting better at whatever they do. They will rehearse the course rehearse the act enough times that once they can concept the whole thing to its completion, and they get out of that think box, then the think box is so important because we have to review our act. We have to repeat it enough times. And the act of mental rehearsal really installs the neurological hardware in your brain. It primes the brain so you have circuits to use. Now, mental rehearsal also changes the body. You can take a group of men and have them imagine or rehearse doing bicep curls for an hour a day for 2 weeks and add an emotional component called stronger, harder, more intense. And for 1 hour, they practice in their mind doing those curls. At the end of 2 weeks, there's a 13.5 increase in muscle strength. They never lifted a weight. Their body's changing by thought alone. So the person who's priming their brain and body through rehearsal, when they get in their play box, there's no thinking. They're just doing. There's just the act. In fact, the thought of what they're doing becomes the experience. They get lost in the act, and their analytical facilities, their analytical mind is out of the way, and they can sustain a state where nothing in their environment is going to move them from this state. They're in the feeling of what it would feel like to play well, and they hold on to that feeling. And when the conditions get tense, they actually do something different. They self-regulate, and they actually crave this moment of performance to be able to produce an outcome. And so there's no mysticism to this. It's just what people do when they get really into something is that we rehearse all the time. So people understand if you take a group of people that never played the piano before and you teach them one-handed scales and chords and they come and practice for 2 hours a day for 5 days, at the end of 5 days, if you do a brain scan before and after, they'll grow circuits on the opposite side of the brain. No magic there. You learn something new. Learning's making new connections. You get your body involved. You get some instruction. You have an experience. Experience enriches the circuits. Repeat it over and over again. Fire and wire and pay attention and stay present. You'll assemble new neurological circuitry. Take another group of people, have them close their eyes, and actually have them mentally rehearse playing the scales and chords for 2 hours a day for 5 days. Scan their brain before and after, and at the end of 5 days, their brain will look like they've been playing the piano for 5 days, but they never lifted a finger. The brain literally changed through the rehearsal. Okay, so now take the person and put them in front of a piano. They never played the piano before. And they could actually play those scales and chords like the people who are actually physically demonstrating it. So what does that have to do for the single mother of 3 children? What does that have to do with the person who's trying to heal a health condition? It's not enough to just have a good meditation and get up and spend the rest of your day reacting and responding to the conditions in your life. That's 1 hour of living or conditioning your body and brain into the future against 15 hours of you responding emotionally from your past. So we got to rehearse, okay, how am I going to be in this situation? How am I going to change? What would love do today? What would greatness look like? It's those frontal lobe questions that actually begins to install the circuitry, and we all do it naturally. The only time we don't do it is when we're living in stress and we're living in survival. Why? Because it's not a time to create. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to go inward. It's not a time to dream. It's a time to run, fight, and hide. And if you're spending the majority of your time in the arousal of those stress hormones, then most people their senses become heightened, they narrow their focus, and now they're engaged in doing anything they can, relying on something outside of them to take away that feeling. So if people begin to understand that they actually can change, and they understand a formula to do it, and they practice that formula and they rehearse it, both by mentally rehearsing it and actually participating in it, the effects should be in the experiment that something should change either in your body or in your life, and that's why we do it. So when you see the changes or the synchronicities or the coincidences or the opportunities starting to show up in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did and you're going to do it again. And many people who have chronic health conditions that just get beyond those thoughts and those habits and those emotions that keep them as that same personality and begin to think, act, and feel differently, notice dramatic changes in their health and in their biology. And we have the data to suggest that people who do this for 7 days, their body looks like genetically and biologically they're in a different life. Their body is no longer responding in the same way, and they're no longer victims to their environment because they can self-regulate. There tends to be a greater resistance to anything.
Isn't it amazing and mind-boggling to think that a person can increase their muscles by 13.5% in just 2 weeks by using just the power of their thoughts? That tells you just about how powerful your thoughts are to create wellness or strength or abundance or whatever you want. There are other authors who have written about this. As a matter of fact, in about 1976, during the Olympics, the Russians had discovered the power of thought and visualization. They were winning every gold medal in most events and were accused of cheating. I don't know if you can read this, but here's the book. It's called Peak Performance by Dr. Charles Garfield, and this is written a while ago. But basically, he talks about how they visualized their success. They visualized, if they were weightlifters, they visualized lifting more weight than they ever had done before, right before the event, and they were able to perform much, much better than before. And it was quite interesting that they did this study where they found out that the more you visualize, the better the outcome was. So the point is that you want to rehearse how you want things to be, right? Get to the emotional component. And in Dr. Joe's case, he was talking about when he was talking about lifting weights and growing your biceps, for example, you want to think certain thoughts like harder, stronger, and more intense while you do your visualization. So if you want to grow muscle. So he also asked the question of, what would love do? How would it feel? How would you be? How would you walk and talk? Because love is really the answer to a lot of our problems in life. It solves almost everything. So you have to go beyond your thoughts so that your body is living. How would you walk? And how would you talk? You have to get beyond your thoughts so that your body is living in a different life, according to Dr. Joe. Next is rule for life number 4. Become truly conscious.
Everybody has done this at some point in their life, right? Where they have to catch the thought. They have to catch how they speak, the act. They have to notice, ooh, this is that weird feeling again. I'm not going to just stay in this feeling. Can I change it, right? So then, if you remind yourself every single day of who you no longer want to be before you start your day, become conscious of your unconscious self, so conscious that you don't go unconscious in your waking day. The next fundamental question is, if your personality creates your personal reality, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And with attention, with presence and intention, energy, begin to fire and wire that thought. If you can fire and wire that thought, you start installing the neurological hardware in your brain. Keep doing it, and it starts acting like a software program. It becomes more automatic. That's the new voice in your head that says you can, it's possible, or whatever. And then, how are you going to behave in the Zoom meeting? How are you going to behave with your children? How are you going to behave with your ex? How are you going to be today when you open your eyes? Now, here's the cool part, and you know this. The act of closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing who you're going to be, planning your actions in the day. Mental rehearsal shows that you could actually install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you already did it or it already happened. Now the brain's no longer a record of the past. It now becomes a map to the future. Okay, we've all rehearsed something in our life and our minds over and over again. Keep doing it, keep rehearsing it, keep reviewing it, and it starts to become more automatic. And you could actually program a person then to behave as a happy person. No magic there. You installed the circuits. Now here's the hardest part. Can you teach your body emotionally what that future would feel like before it happens? In other words, don't wait for your healing to feel gratitude. Don't wait for your new relationship to feel love. Don't wait for the mystical moment to feel awe. That's kind of the old model of reality of cause and effect. Let's wait for something out there to happen to take away this emptiness, this guilt, this lack, this suffering, whatever. What if I could condition my body emotionally into the future? So then we started studying not only brain coherence, but we started studying heart coherence. Could a person trade resentment and watch their heart beat in a really irregular fashion to a more coherent fashion where when they're feeling gratitude, when they're feeling inspiration, when they're feeling love, could they practice that enough times, so much so that they can condition their body into the emotion of the future? Now, here's the cool part about that. Our research shows you could absolutely do that and do it so well that you feel like the future that you're in wanting to experience has already happened. And when it feels like it's already happened, you feel less separate from it, which means you're no longer looking for it. Why would you look for it if you feel like it's already happened? Now, to become familiar with the old self and then fire and wire and condition the body emotionally and chemically and become familiar with the new self, if you're truly in the experiment of life and I truly change my personality, there should be some evidence in my world that there's been some change, either in my body and in my life and in some way. And literally, their biology changes. Their immune system changes. We've isolated thousands of metabolites that show that there's a flourishing going on in the body. The body's responding. It's believing emotionally that it's living in a different environment.
So let's break this down into what you need to do exactly to get this to work. Basically, there are 5 steps to consciously create what you want. The first step is to become aware of your unconscious thoughts. This is where you must step outside of yourself, outside of the matrix, and see yourself reacting to certain triggers, such as your ex, or bills in the mail, or the news, or whatever. Once you become aware of your thoughts and feelings, the next step, step number 2, is to stop the thought, feeling, an impulse to act, and then purposely think a better feeling thought. The trick in this second step is to quickly change that normally negative, reactive thought to something slightly more positive. If you are feeling a very low negative emotion like depression, you can't suddenly jump to the highest vibrational feelings of love, joy, peace, or passion. The point is that you can work your way up something called the emotional scale. The emotional scale has about 20 emotions on it, from depression all the way up to love, joy, peace, and appreciation. This is step number 3, is to become more consciously aware and to think better and better feeling thoughts. Usually you can't make your way up the emotional scale from depression to joy and bliss in one sitting. Give yourself some time. Take your time with it. Step number 4 is to repeat affirmations that you want to think and feel, but only repeat them if your vibration is stable and in alignment with the affirmation. For example, you could say, I am worthy. I am good enough. I can heal myself of anything. But only do it when it feels true to you or if you are close to the feeling. Perhaps after you have worked your way up the emotional scale some. Then you can do as he says, as Dr. Joe says, and mentally rehearse how you're going to act and who you want to be. Let's call that step number 5. Mentally rehearse who you want to be and how you want to act. And then practice that thought and feeling until you condition the body into the emotion of the future, as Dr. Joe would say. Remember, the trick to being a creator is to feel the feeling first of what it would be like to be, do, and have whatever you want. So be unconditionally happy. Don't wait for or depend on external conditions to make you happy. That's not how it works. Your thoughts and feelings create your reality. Don't face reality, create it. And now, let's listen to Dr. Joe on Rules for Life number 5, Create Heart Coherence.
Can I teach my body emotionally what my future will feel like before it happens? Now, this is really important because there's a pandemic going on in the world that has nothing to do with a virus. It has everything to do with people's attention span and learning. People need a rush of dopamine in order to catch their attention, or a rush of adrenaline to learn. And so that they're dependent on their outer environment to regulate their emotional state. Now, this is different now. Now, I'm going to say to you, get in that beautiful heart of yours, and I want you to feel gratitude for the event before it occurs. Well, I can't feel it because it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, that's the conditioning. That's the hypnosis. So then when you teach people how to create heart coherence and self-regulate, then it makes sense then with a coherent brain, they can hold the image of their future. They can actually then rehearse who they're going to be. They can bring up the emotions of their future. Now, here's the cool part.
Awesome.
If they can feel their gratitude before their healing begins. If they feel their abundance or their worthiness before they have their wealth, it will start generating abundance. If they start being in love with themselves and being in love with life, they'll create an equal. That's the law. If they're in awe of life or in awe of the moment, they're going to have a mystical experience. If they're empowered, they're going to start stepping towards their success. So then when we wait for the outer world to change our internal state, that's a conditioning process, because some people will live in lack and separation their entire life because they're not creating anything. When this happens, then I'll feel happy. That's the illusion of three-dimensional reality. That's cause and effect, but feeling the emotion ahead of the experience is causing an effect. So the heart, when it's coherent, tends to produce an external magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. Now you got a Wi-Fi signal. Now, when you have a coherent brain, the brain could actually lay the information on that signal. And the thought of your wealth or your health can be carried on the frequency of that heart emotion. Emotions are the end product of an experience, right? Epigenetics says that's the environment that signals the gene. If the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, that person's signaling genes ahead of the environment. And now they're biologically believing, behaving, and actually becoming that person. So if the person sustains that state, and we look at novice meditators that come for a week, and 90% of them, and the metabolites, not just a few, the majority of the metabolites.
So if you want to create what you want, you need to feel the feeling of what you want before it manifests, not after. Waiting for your abundance to come, or your health to come, or the love of your life to come to you so that you can then be happy is backward. The feeling must come first. The belief must come first. Then the manifestations will come. Almost all of us have been programmed to believe that we cannot be happy until or unless external conditions change. But what Dr. Joe is proving through his scientific research is that if you feel the feeling first of whatever it is that you want, then you can create the biological environment in your body as if you are living in that new reality now. But you may be thinking, I don't know how it would feel to have abundance, or to be abundant, or have perfect health, or have the love of my life. How do I create that feeling first? That's the work. That's where you must use your imagination and mental rehearsal. You don't need to have $1 million in your bank account to know how it would feel. Imagine it clearly enough, and you can manifest the feeling of freedom and expansion that more money would bring. You don't need to have perfect health to know how it would feel. Use your imagination and feel the feeling of vigor and physical strength that perfect health would bring. And you don't need to have the perfect mate in your life right now to know what that would feel like either. Use your imagination and feel the feeling of love, intimacy, passion, and joy. Again, quiet your mind, close your eyes, and imagine what it would feel like. You can do this. We all can. And the sooner you learn how to do it, the more enjoyable your life experience will be. And now, let's listen to Dr. Joe on Rules for Life number 6, Alter Your Lifestyle.
Well, as anybody, I mean, chronic diseases require a lifestyle change. And change is an interesting concept. So the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're not going to be in the known. You're stepping out into the unknown. You're doing something differently. And the body, which has been conditioned to be the mind, the servant is now the master. So the body loves the familiar known. It loves the same suffering. It loves the same pain. It loves the same unworthiness. It's been conditioned that way for years on end. It really is running the show. So the moment you step out into the unknown, the body goes, wait a second, I'd rather feel guilty than this feeling of the unknown because I can't predict my future. So the body starts influencing the mind, and we start to hear this chatter in our head that says, well, I can start tomorrow, tomorrow's a better day. You really don't feel like it today. Why don't you just have one piece of cake? You're a loser. It's your parents' fault. It's your ex's fault. It's your culture's fault, whatever it is. And if we accept, believe, and surrender to that thought as if it's the truth, that's an old circuit in the brain. That thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same feeling or emotion. The person says, well, this feels right to me. No, that feels familiar. Crossing the river of change, going from the old self to the new self, there is a neurological, a biological, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self. There's pruning going on. There's inhibition going on. We're no longer releasing the same stress hormones that give us the arousal. And so if there's 3 types of stress: physical, chemical, and emotional. Physical stress being trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. Chemical stress, viruses, bacteria, pesticides, pollutants, toxins, hangovers, whatever. Emotional stress, that's the big one. That's family tragedies, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, whatever it is. It tends to be then that the difficult one to manage really is our emotional stress. So if you can help people to get more physically balanced, more chemically balanced, and to become more emotionally balanced, then the effects of their personal change will be expedited.
Yeah.
And there'll be a longer duration. So the person sees you for 6 months, they start a great program, they start making the right choices, and they start feeling better. And then once they make the wrong choice, then it's a downward spiral back to the old unconscious habits and emotional condition. They feel unworthy again. And they return back to your clinic, or they return back to your consultation, and they come back with the same exact conditions. And the simple solution is, because you return back to the same personality, and you're feeling the same emotions, and your body's back to believing it's in the same environmental condition. So if your personality creates your personal reality, and I believe that, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, then the present personality who's listening to this podcast has created the present personal reality called their life. Not your ex, not your parents, not your boss. You create your life. So it makes sense then, if you wanted to create a new personal reality, you'd have to change your personality. In other words, if you want to change your life, you have to change, and nothing changes in your life until you change. So then this first step in change then, 95% of who we are is a set of unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. Then the first step is to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, to become so aware of how you behave. Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you make excuses? Do you judge? Are you aggressive? And then look at the emotions. What is this emotion I'm feeling? Wow, this is guilt. This is sadness. This is victimization. This is unhappiness. Name it, so now you're so conscious of it that you don't go unconscious and return back to the same self. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change.
So if you want to heal yourself of any dis-ease, it's going to take a lifestyle change. You're going to have to alter your lifestyle. As Dr. Joe said, if you want to change your personal reality, then you're going to have to change your personality. Change starts with awareness, and then a determination or a decision to change, and then action. But as Dr. Joe said, the problem is that the body does not like the unknown or the unfamiliar, and it will quite literally align you with negative thoughts or even perhaps feed your mind with your programmed thoughts and beliefs about yourself. Negative thoughts and beliefs. That's when you must have the fortitude and the insight to step outside of yourself to see yourself. Become aware of your unconscious thoughts. Consciously become aware of your unconscious thoughts. This is where it can be helpful to create a system of consciousness. A systems approach to this can be very helpful because in any system, it's about making it easier to reach a goal and, even more importantly, maintain that goal. There are several components in a system. You have an input component, a transformation component, an output component, and a monitoring component. So you have inputs that are assimilated or transformed, and then you have the improved desired output. But in any system, you have something that monitors the progress, monitors the inputs and outputs, and monitors the results. So what may help you is to create a new conscious personal reality system. You have inputs, which are your normal, habitual negative thoughts and beliefs, but then your monitoring component catches those negative thoughts to be processed by the transformation component in your system. Repeat. You have inputs, which are your normal, habitual negative thoughts and beliefs, but then your monitoring component catches those negative thoughts to be processed by the transformation component in your system, which is simply you purposely changing your thoughts. Now here is where systems excel. Your system is never looking for perfection. It's simply adjusting itself to aim for perfection. For example, a thermostat system usually allows for a couple degrees warmer than ideal and a couple degrees cooler than ideal before it activates either heat or cold to get closer to the ideal temperature. In other words, don't expect perfection from yourself. Expect that you might suddenly be triggered and spiral down into negativity. That's actually normal. But with your new personal reality system in place, it will catch that negative train of thoughts before it gains momentum, and you'll be able to stop any spiral down. I think a lot of us are hard on ourselves, and we think that we are failures if we don't do this work perfectly right from the get-go. But the goal is to be persistent and consistent, not perfect. No system is perfect. It simply aims for it. In other words, give yourself a break and use any failure as simply useful information, not judgment. And now, let's listen to Dr. Joe talk about rule for life number 7. Allow others to have their moment.
Never try to reason with your children when they're emotional, because no new information can enter their nervous system that isn't equal to the emotion they're experiencing. Do you want to be reasoned with when you're emotional? Do you want to be left alone? You want a few minutes, yes? Now, if there's an injury, if there's danger, of course you have to step in. If there's chemical needs, of course you have to, take care of that. But for the most part, with my children, I allowed them to have their moment. But whenever they had their moment, I would stop whatever I was doing and I would turn and look at them. And I would watch them. I wanted them to know that I was observing them. Never said anything to them unless they asked. And when the emotions wore off, I would say to them, at the end of the day, I'd get in bed with them and I'd say, it's a tough day for me today. And I would share with them what I was working on as if they were my best friend or an adult. I didn't hold back at all with them. And I would do that to create the space of safety where they could start expressing what they knew that I observed about them in the most objective way, self-reflective way. And then they would say, oh yeah, I lost my temper with Paris, her friend. And I said, I know, I saw you. This is right before they go to bed. What's their brain waves at this point? Very suggestible. They're already dipping into theta, they're in alpha, they're in the love stories because it helps them to imagine. And then I would say to them the same thing every time. You know, I really don't care what happened. What I care about is if you had another opportunity in the same situation, how you would do it differently. I just want to know how we could evolve your experience. And then, of course, they would give me answers that were always limited. You know, especially my boys, but, you know. And I'd say, yeah, well, if you do that, you know, more than likely this is going to happen. Did you think of that? No. And then we go back and forth until we had a very clear understanding of what would be the higher road to take the next time. And then I would say to them, no, just so I'm sure that I understand this, can you repeat it back to me? Like, if that happened again, what would you do? And then they would go and say it, and then it would fall off a little bit, and I'd bring them back, and I'd review it with them until the point where they could explain it exactly what they would do. Are you with me? What did they just do? They mentally rehearsed it. Yes or no? And they're installing the circuitry. They're priming their brain for the experience. I'm giving them tools neurologically. Are you with me still? And I say to them, then if you did that, then that more than likely would create this experience, and how would you feel? And I would let them just contact that feeling just for a minute. And all I wanted to do was combine an intention and an emotion. A new emotion. You with me? Then I'd get them in bed, tuck them in, and I would tell them a story of these kids that lived in a mystical land with castles and dragons and princesses. And then I would tell them the story of these kids, and then I would bring in their story into the allegory. Because there's a story, allegory is a great way to associate with characters. And then I would tell them the lessons that they learned while I repeated it back to them in a very creative story. And so many times they'd look at me just before they fall asleep and they'd say, "Was that me?" I'd say, "I don't know, was it?" The next day I'd get them up. Of course, I'm up at, before the sun. Come on, get up. We got things to do. Come on. I connect with them. I'd always connect with them and let them know that they're important and that they matter and that I love them. And I would tell them how the day was going to go, the main things, and I'm going to remind you just so you have some structure. And then there's going to be time to play, but we have to get these things done. I just help them understand that there was some ritual involved in this, some boundaries, some intention. And then when we were at breakfast, I'd say, "What was it that you would do if you had that same situation with Paris? Again, tell me." And then I would have them rehearse it again. And I would do it to the point that they would say, well, they wouldn't say that. They'd say, "God, I just want this thing to happen so you can just leave me alone. I just can't wait for it to happen so I can get on with my life."
So, Dr. Joe gives excellent advice in this audio clip as to how to handle children. But this information can also be applied to anyone, any of our relationships. How many times have you been in the middle of a fight with someone and they wouldn't budge an inch to see things your way? It never works. When two people are arguing, usually their stress hormones are through the roof. Their blood flow leaves their brain and they say and act in ways that are tied to the fight, flight, or freeze response. And as Dr. Joe said, no new information can enter their nervous system when emotions are high. Dr. Joe's information here can quite literally save a marriage, a friendship, a job, a career, a team project, or any situation where emotions get high in your interactions with others. So what is the point and what should you do if someone gets emotional? Let them have their moment. Let them be. As Dr. Joe said, no one wants to be reasoned with when they are upset. Of course, there may be times when you don't have a choice, if it's an emergency, or if it's imperative that the other person, such as the child, alter their immediate behavior for their safety. But when it's not an emergency, let others have their moment. You run the risk of them bringing you down into their vibration too. Don't allow or let anyone for any reason to get you upset. It's simply not worth it. But if you falter and get into an argument, don't beat yourself up over it either. We're all human. And now, let's listen to Dr. Joe discuss Rule for Life number 8, change your environment.
I believe that if you can get 2 out of those 3 in order, if there's physical stress, emotional stress, and chemical stress, then there's got to be physical balance, chemical balance, and emotional balance. So let's just say you take all your vitamins, you take your drugs, you do your Pilates, you do your core power, you get massage, acupuncture, chiropractic, you run, do all the things, but you're still in a toxic environment where you're responding and reacting to the same conditions emotionally. Well, your body is going to stay in the past because the emotion is keeping you connected to the past. So what happens then, this happens numerous times and the people that do come to our work, the chemo didn't work. The surgery didn't work. The radiation didn't work. The vegan diet didn't work. The ketogenic diet didn't work. The yoga didn't work. Nothing was working. And so then this is a point where the person says, nothing outside of me is changing what's inside of me. And we just had a cancer researcher on the stage had stage 4 sarcoma in her uterus that metastasized everywhere. There's no evidence of her disease in her body any longer. Now, do I appreciate medicine? Do I appreciate pharmacology? Yes, I do. And I think for acute health conditions, that medicine has a really great handle on acute and crisis situations. When it comes to chronic health conditions require a lifestyle change. Period. You got to make different choices if you truly want to do it. So 100 years ago, 75 years ago, you get diagnosed with a health condition. You went to the doctor and he said, you need this organ taken out. You need this type of treatment. And I'm the authority. You have no access to the information that I have. So just do what I tell you. Right. And everybody signed and informed consent. And if my gallbladder's not good, take that out. If my uterus isn't good, take that out. Take out whatever you want. So then fast forward to today, you get a diagnosis. What happens now? People go, oh goodness, thanks for the diagnosis. Then they go home and they research everything about the health condition. Why? Because information is available now through technology. So they go back to their doctor and they say, gosh, I want to try this other treatment. I want to try this alternative thing. And the doctor either says, I don't know anything about that, or that's trash. And the person now looks squarely at the doctor in the eye and says, time to find a new doctor. In other words, people do the best when they feel good about the health care that they're choosing, right? So they're taking their power back now to be able to say, maybe there is another way. So the pharmacology that we use when we're altered, either with anxiety or depression or cyclic mood patterns or whatever it is an attempt to create chemical balance in the body. However, if you're still reacting to your ex in the same exact way, or you're still always predicting the worst thing that could happen to you in your future and embracing the emotion of that event, you're conditioning your body into anxiety and you'll have a panic attack. And yes, the pharmacology will help to create more balance, but your response and reaction to the environment somehow causes you to become dependent on that exogenous substance. Now, I don't have a problem with that because everybody's at their own point in evolution. My mother just listened to anything the doctor said. Even when I said to her, Mom, your blood pressure is up because of stock market crash. She didn't want to hear that. She didn't think that she had to go to the doctor through all these tests and all this stuff. And of course, that's what it turned out to be. So there's a greater listening that's happening in the world now because of information. That it's the 4-minute mile. That person that had the sarcoma that stood on the stage was a cancer researcher that told her story. That's the 4-minute mile. I'm watching 1,500 people in the audience leaning in. They're witnessing truth right in front of them. Now they're conscious that there's another possibility that they were unconscious of. And she doesn't look vegan, and she doesn't look slim, and she doesn't look young and buffed and like a movie star. She just looks like a person. A normal person. And invariably somebody in the audience listening to truth, she's speaking truth right now, telling her story about how hard it was to overcome herself, how hard it was to overcome her body when she was in pain and she didn't feel like doing the work. She did it anyway. To overcome her doubt, to overcome her fear, to overcome all of those things and believe in a future that she can't see or experience with her senses yet, but truly understands the science of how that takes place. Once you understand the what and the why, the how becomes easier. So we use science as the contemporary language to demystify the process of personal change and transformation. It is the language that we use that doesn't exclude anybody. We don't talk tradition, we don't talk religion, we don't talk culture, we don't talk spirituality, because that's going to divide the audience. So we create the scientific model. That's the first point. Learn it, be present with it. But the next step is you got to be able to teach it back. So in our audiences, when we explain things and we're combining quantum physics with neuroscience and all neuroendocrinology and all that stuff, once I finish the concept, you're going to have to turn to Jonathan and say, okay, let me just explain this. Because if I got to fire and wire this in my brain, I got to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And nothing left to conjecture, nothing left to superstition, nothing left to dogma. You understand exactly what you're doing and why. And when you understand the meaning behind it, your prefrontal cortex turns on. And when it does, the powerhouse turns on. And you could get in an ice bath and know nothing about it, the benefits of an ice bath, get in an ice bath, and you could really have a really bad response. You can get some knowledge about what to do when you're in the ice bath and the value of it. And once you understand that and you get in the ice bath, you will actually have positive effects on your immune system, where when you didn't know what you were doing and assign meaning to it, you had a negative effect. So the person then who has the intention and the understanding, and we set up the conditions in the environment, and we give them numerous opportunities to get beyond themselves, numerous opportunities to practice and evolve their experience. Our research shows that if you do that for 7 days, the number of metabolic changes, metabolites from the cell, thousands of metabolites that are being released in the brain and body, suggests that the person is literally, their body's believing they're living in a different environment. Now, here's the weird part. They're in a ballroom. There's nothing really amazing happening in a ballroom. I've been to thousands of ballrooms. They all look the same. And yet the body's looking like it's in a very enriched environment. It's looking like it's in a different place. So when you have evidence and testimony, and you have evidence in scientific measurements, I think evidence all of a sudden becomes the loudest voice. And it only takes one person or two people to break that 4-minute mile. And then all of a sudden, just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, all of a sudden you see health and wellness become as infectious as disease. There's a dramatic transformation in biology. So now that that's possible, now that people are aware of that possibility, now it's in their consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, and information allows us to become aware of what we were unaware of. And that's what life is about, to evolve our experiences. And some of those people are dependent on pharmaceuticals and dependent. And I never say stop taking anything. I always say, keep going to your doctor, keep getting the scans, keep getting the tests. You need feedback to let you know what you're doing is correct, and then make another choice if it isn't. But a lot of people actually cross that river and wind up on the other side. And those are the people that we're studying, because their blood is rich with a lot of information that suggests that there's a very different.
One of the interesting things about doing this work is that you begin to realize that it almost doesn't matter at all what your diet is or how much you exercise. So as Dr. Joe said, you can try the keto diet or the vegan diet or the carnivore diet. He didn't say that part, but, or taking vitamins or whatever, but that's not going to have nearly the impact that your thoughts have on your health. As Dr. Joe said, if nothing outside of a person is helping them to change, then the logical conclusion is that it has to be what's inside you that needs to change. Abraham once said that 95% of your health is related to your thoughts, and only 5% is related to your diet. That's huge. That's a huge difference. It's not that your diet and exercise don't matter. It's just that it matters very little compared to your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. As they say, what you feed your mind is more important than what you feed your body. And so this explains why people are so dogmatic about what diet works and what doesn't. Whatever they believe in will be helpful, not because of the physical makeup of the diet or how it works or the cause or the effect of it, but rather simply because of the belief that the person has in it. This is why vegans are so sure that their diet is the best. They believe in it, and so it works. And this is why carnivore dieters are so sure that their diet is the best. It's the same thing. It's not the diet. It's their thoughts and beliefs about the diet that is helping them the most. Knowledge is power, and when you awaken to the power of your thoughts and beliefs to create your reality, it's a very freeing experience. As Dr. Joe said, people now have easy access to information. So if their doctor recommends something, they can easily go research it on the internet, discover the side effects, decide if that's worth the risk to them, and then search for alternatives. Also in this clip, Dr. Joe talked about the cancer researcher who had sarcoma in her uterus. She was able to remove all of it through meditation. Her experience is more evidence that we all can heal ourselves through the power of thought, meditation, and elevating our emotions. Dr. Joe mentioned the 4-minute mile here because it used to be thought that it was humanly impossible to run the mile in under 4 minutes. But when the first guy did it, Roger Bannister, almost overnight, many other runners did it too. Why? Because they suddenly realized and then subsequently believed it was possible. Change your inner thoughts, change your life. And when you change your inner environment, you can change your outer one too. And now, let's move on to rule number 9. Learn stress management.
One thing, if it took you 5 years of living in chronic stress and what are the emotions of stress and survival? Aggression, anger, hatred, competition, judgment, insecurity, envy, jealousy, pain, suffering, guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, powerlessness. Those are all derived from the hormones of stress, and psychology calls the normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness. And so then, if you're living in emergency and your response to your coworker, to your boss, to the traffic, to the news, to whatever it is, weakens the organism, and you're switching on that emergency system over time. No organism can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. You're drawing from the body's vital resources, and you're converting all of its energy into chemistry for some threat, real or imagined. Okay, so then if you keep doing that in chronic conditions, there's no energy for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. The immune system dials down. The digestive system becomes out of phase. Hormones change. Our cardiovascular system changes. Our respiratory system changes. This is because the body is believing it's living in a dangerous environment, okay? So the problem then becomes that the arousal of these stress hormones that create fear, that create anger, aggression, or create pain, give the body a rush of energy. Now, people become almost like an addict. They need the problems in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that arousal, to that emotion. Yeah. And now, if you can turn that response on by thought alone, number one, you become addicted to your own thoughts. And number two, you become addicted to the very life, the life that you don't even like. Yeah. So then you ask the person, why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 5 years ago. Well, what that really means is they had some really profoundly emotional experience. And the stronger the emotion we feel, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more we pay attention to what causes it. And the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called the long-term memory. And so then that person then is altered biologically from that trauma, from that event. And what they don't know is every time they remember the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was occurring. Okay, well then you tell the person, why are you this way? Well, then they'll tell the story about how it happened. And the research on memory says that 50% of that story, the way you recount it, is actually not accurate. It's actually not the truth. That people don't have the same brain, so they embellish the story to excuse themselves from changing. And if they make it more difficult, or they add more components to it, then now they'll reaffirm their identity in being a certain way. That story becomes very important to them. And they believe it, they behave it as it, and they ultimately become it. And so then can you use those same principles and begin to start to manage your inner world? And by regulating, taking the time before you start your day and say, okay, before I grab my cell phone, before I get up and run through my routine, you know, my automatic routine where people are on automatic pilot and a habituation of what they did yesterday, and their body's dragging them into the same predictable future based on what they did in the past, and they've lost their free will to choose, to become conscious to a set of automatic programs. Well, if the familiar past is the known and the predictable future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of the present moment. So if you said, okay, let me get present here, let me remind myself of those thoughts I don't want to think, let me remind myself of the behaviors I want to change. Let me review in my mind the emotions that caused me to move to a lower denominator. Let me become so conscious of that I won't go unconscious again. Let me remind myself who I do want to be, how I do want to think, how I do want to act, how I do want to feel. And let me see if I can get so good at doing this with my eyes closed when I start my day that I can do it with my eyes open. Now, this river of change, you know, people say, I can't predict my future. Well, the best way to predict it is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So our research shows that if you teach a person to go a little further than where they normally stop, you know, when they get uncomfortable, they quit and reach for their cell phone, or they say, I'm busy, got too much to do. If you get people present, really, and you teach them how to stretch a little further, and they get beyond that known, and there's no danger, there's no threat, there's no survival, the body actually begins to relax into the present moment. And when that happens, we see this over and over again. Energy moves right into the heart. And now the heart, all of a sudden, starts to beat with more order, more coherence. The autonomic nervous system is no longer dysregulated from stress. It's starting to organize, and this feeling feels right? So then if you can sustain that state, independent of the conditions in your environment, then you're mastering your environment.
So, as you probably already know, stress is bad for you. But it's good for emergency situations because, for example, adrenaline will give us a huge burst of energy to deal with whatever is stressing us out, such as a saber-toothed tiger chasing us in the woods. But that rarely happens nowadays, right? But what does happen are things like an unexpected bill, or an unexpected health condition, or a breakup of a relationship or friendship, or something not going the way that we wanted it to. In these examples, we can't burn up the energy from the stress in a physical way. We end up having to suppress it. And then because we have to suppress it, it turns against us. Studies have shown that cortisol, a stress hormone, makes our cells more susceptible to cancer. And as Dr. Joe said, no organism can live in constant stress over time. So this is why it's very important to learn to manage the stress in our lives. So then the question becomes, how do we manage stress? What can we do? The obvious answer is to meditate more. But Dr. Joe takes it further and explains that if we can keep going in our meditation just a little bit further than what feels comfortable, go a little beyond, as Dr. Joe said, and if you do this in an environment that is safe for the body, it will relax and allow yourself to go to the next level. And that is when energy will enter the heart. And the longer that you can stay in that state of mind and being, then you can master your environment and your life. So learn to manage your stress. One of the main causes of stress is worry about the future. But worry is a useless emotion that serves no purpose. Instead of worrying about the future, create it with your excited, positive thoughts. Instead of worrying about your current reality, start creating a new one. And now, let's move on to rule number 10. Improve your personality.
Your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to this podcast has created the present personal reality called their life. Which means then if you want to change your life, you want to create a new personal reality, you're going to have to change your personality. You're going to have to change because nothing changes in your life until you change. So what is the understanding of change? So we've spent over 10 years studying a way to explain what change is, because if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts, 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, you're in trouble, because the same thoughts will lead to the same choices will lead to the same behaviors create the same experiences, and the same experiences produce those very same emotions, and those same emotions influence our same thoughts and our biology. Everything stays the same because we're the same. I got to change my personality. Well, this concept called metacognition, the seat of our conscience, our frontal lobe, allows us to think about what we're thinking about, to notice how we're behaving, and to become aware of how we're feeling. And the repetition of thinking, acting, and feeling in the same way causes our brain to become hardwired into very specific neural patterns, right? So the moment we become conscious of those thoughts, the moment we become aware of those behaviors, the moment we notice those feelings, we're no longer the program.
So your personality creates your personal reality. And usually we each have around 60,000 thoughts per day that are not positive. Those same thoughts create the same choices. And as Dr. Joe said, those same choices create the same behaviors, and those same behaviors create the same experiences and the same life. This explains why it can feel like you get stuck in a rut in life. It's almost like the movie Groundhog Day, where nothing changes unless we change. But the point to all of this is that you do have the power to change. You do have the control. You do have the ability to create a personal reality system where you monitor your thoughts and stop them in their tracks when you realize that you are thinking old thoughts that no longer serve you. You have the control. You have the power. And you can do this. We all have ants in our brains, or hardwired thinking that is difficult to change. But we all have metacognition, as Dr. Joe said. We have the ability to think about what we are thinking about. We are the only species on planet Earth with this ability. And so if you are alive, you are worthy. If you are here, you are good enough. If you are breathing right now and aware of yourself and your environment, you are not only human, but the furthest extension of source energy, experiencing itself. When you believe it, you will see it. When you see it, you are no longer part of the program. Instead, you have stepped outside of the matrix of life and embraced the Creator, which is who you really are.
Christmas is coming, and we would love to give back to our Pacific family. We are offering 2 lucky winners a ticket to Dr. Joe Dispenza's week-long retreat in Cartagena, Colombia, worth $2,300 each. To enter the giveaway, you must be a subscriber to our channel Pacific. Like this video, comment your manifestation goals for the year 2023, share this video with any 5 people, and stay tuned on our channel as we will declare the winner soon. Please refer to the description below for more info. Good luck!
I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And also, if you can, please leave a comment below about what you learned from this discussion about Dr. Joe's rules for life. What is one point that was an aha moment for you? Also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to, and I know I'm going to butcher her name, Alexandra Bachabedins, for staying dedicated to our channel. We thank you for your love and support to our Pacific family. And now, it's up to you what you do with this information. Information is power. Use it wisely, and you can easily transform your life into the reality that you want. Thanks for watching, and have a great day or night.